The unshaken human. The room was dark and cold. The walls were made of smooth black metal, humming softly with hidden power. A single bright light shone from above, casting deep shadows on the floor. In the middle of the room, a man sat on a metal chair, his hands locked in heavy cuffs. He was alone. His name was Captain Jake Carter. Across from him stood a towering alien, General Zorvac of the Torlik Empire. The alien warlord was nearly 8 feet tall, his skin rough and dark like volcanic rock. His red eyes glowed in the dim light. His armor, thick and battle-worn, carried the marks of countless victories. Zorvac had conquered many worlds. He had seen kings kneel, warriors cry, and civilizations burn. But this human, this one single man, sat there, calm, unshaken. Zorvac leaned closer, his deep voice like thunder. "Why do you not tremble, human?" Jake smirked. His blue eyes held no fear, no panic, no surrender. "Because I know something you don't," Jake said. His voice was steady, almost amused. Zorvac narrowed his eyes. He did not like this. He had captured human soldiers before. They always screamed. They begged. They feared him. But this one was different. "What do you know?" Zorvac growled. His sharp claws tapped against the metal table between them. Jake leaned back slightly, as if he were relaxing. "You'll see soon enough." Zorvac's patience was thin. He slammed his fist on the table, making it shake. "Enough games. Your planet is weak. Your people will fall. I will burn Earth just like I have burned 100 other worlds." Jake just raised an eyebrow. "Is that what you think?" Zorvac bared his sharp teeth. "It is what I know." Jake chuckled. "You're making a mistake." The warlord's eyes flared with anger. No human had ever dared to speak to him this way. He stepped forward, towering over Jake, his shadow stretching across the floor. "You are alone. Your army is defeated. Your weapons are gone. What could you possibly do?" Jake tilted his head slightly. He glanced around the room. At the cameras in the corners, at the door locked behind him, at the guards standing still outside. Then he turned back to Zorvac, his smirk returning. "That's your first mistake." Zorvac stared at him. The human was up to something. But what? A low beeping sound echoed from the far side of the room. It was soft, almost unnoticeable. Zorvac frowned. A security alert. Jake let out a quiet sigh. Right on time. The beeping grew louder. A voice crackled through Zorvac's communication device. "General, there's an intruder on the ship. There." The transmission cut off. For the first time, Zorvac felt something he had not felt in years. Doubt. He turned back to Jake, eyes burning. "What have you done?" Jake grinned. "I told you. You'll see soon enough." A deep, distant explosion rumbled through the ship. The lights flickered. The hum of the metal walls changed. Something was happening. Something big. Zorvac's claws clenched. His anger was rising. This human, this single human, was not afraid. He had no weapons, no armor, no army. And yet, somehow, he was still winning. Jake Carter slowly leaned forward, locking eyes with the alien warlord. His voice was quiet, but every word dripped with confidence. "The second mistake, thinking I came alone." The ship shook again. The alarms blared. The heavy steel door behind Zorvac slammed open. And in that moment, Zorvac finally understood. Jake Carter was not alone. The real battle had just begun. The fear of the mighty. The deep, eerie alarm echoed through the massive warship. The sound bounced off cold metal walls, a warning of something unexpected. Zorvac's red eyes narrowed. This was impossible. His warship, the Tyrant's Wrath, was a fortress in the stars. It had crushed entire fleets. No enemy had ever breached its walls. Until now. He turned sharply toward Jake Carter, The human prisoner still sitting calmly in his chair. Jake wasn't struggling. He wasn't panicking. He was smiling. Zorvac hated that smile. It was the look of a man who had already won. "You are lying." Zorvac's voice was low, dangerous. "You cannot escape. You have nothing." Jake exhaled slowly and shrugged. "That's what you think." Another explosion rocked the ship. This one was closer. The warlord turned toward the door. The guards standing outside were shifting nervously. They had never heard the ship's alarms blare like this. They had never seen their leader hesitate. For the first time, doubt crept into their eyes. Zorvac's claws clenched into a fist. This cannot be happening. He turned back to the human, this time stepping closer. His massive shadow loomed over Jake. His sharp teeth gleamed under the flickering lights. "What have you done?" he growled. Jake leaned forward, eyes locked on Zorvac. His voice was steady, almost amused. "I told you. You underestimated us." The warlord's patience snapped. "Enough," Zorvac roared. His hand shot forward, grabbing Jake by the throat, lifting him from the chair. The cuffs on Jake's wrists clanked together, but he didn't struggle. Even now, he wasn't afraid. Zorvac squeezed. "Tell me what is happening, or I will break you." Jake chuckled, his voice strained but unfazed. "You're already broken, Zorvac. You just don't know it yet." Another explosion boomed through the ship. This time, the floor beneath them shook violently. Sparks rained down from the ceiling. The hum of the warship's powerful engine faltered for the first time. Something was very wrong. A static-filled voice crackled through Zorvac's communicator. It was one of his officers. "General, we are under attack. Unknown forces have breached." The message cut off. Zorvac stiffened. His warship was under siege. But that was impossible. There was no human fleet nearby. No distress signals had been sent. The ship's scanners had detected no enemy ships before departure. Then how? The warlord dropped Jake, who landed on his feet, rubbing his throat. Zorvac turned toward the guards. "Find out what is happening. Now." The soldiers scrambled to obey, leaving the room in a rush. Jake smirked, rolling his shoulders. "You always thought of us as weak, didn't you?" Zorvac spun back toward him, eyes blazing with fury. "You are weak. You are nothing. Your kind is fragile, pathetic." Jake interrupted. "Then why are your soldiers afraid?" Zorvac's words caught in his throat. "Afraid?" He turned toward the open doorway. Outside, in the dark corridors of the tyrant's wrath, he saw it. The once mighty Torlak soldiers were hesitating. They had never hesitated before. But now, something had changed. They gripped their weapons tighter. Their sharp reptilian eyes darted around the hallway. The red emergency lights reflected off their metallic armor, but their postures were stiff, tense. They were listening. Listening to the booms of distant explosions. Listening to the shouts of their fellow warriors over the radio, shouts that were cut off too soon. Listening to something they had never experienced before. Doubt. For the first time in their long history of conquest, the mighty Torlak warriors were feeling fear. Zorvac refused to believe it. He had crushed civilizations, burned planets. He was feared across the stars. And now, a single human had turned the tables. No, this was a trick, a deception. Zorvac turned back to Jake, his red eyes burning. "You will tell me what is happening. Now." Jake sighed. He glanced at his wrist, as if checking a watch. But he had no watch. Instead, he counted softly. 3, 2. A deep boom thundered through the warship. The lights flickered violently. Then, darkness. The ship's emergency systems kicked in, flooding the room with dim, pulsing red light. For the first time in years, the tyrant's wrath had lost power. Zorvac's communicator crackled to life again. A panicked voice came through. "General, the engines, sabotage, shields, offline. We've lost control. Static. Silence. Zorvak's claws twitched. This wasn't an attack. This was something worse. This was a plan. A plan carefully set in motion. A human plan. Jake's voice broke the silence. You never asked yourself the real question. Zorvak turned slowly. His eyes locked on the human once more. Jake's smirk was gone now. His expression was serious. Deadly serious. You never asked how I got captured so easily. Zorvak's chest tightened. A cold realization crept up his spine. Jake took a step forward. You see, Zorvak, you didn't capture me. Another step. I let you take me. Zorvak's claws twitched. No. Impossible. Jake tilted his head. And you know what that means. He smiled again. It means I'm exactly where I want to be. And then, the door behind them blew open. The war had just begun. The silent countdown. The warship tyrant's wrath was dying. Zorvak could feel it. The pulse of the engines, once steady like a drum of war, was fading. The deep hum of power thrumming through the walls was gone. The mighty Torlak flagship, a beast that had conquered countless planets, now drifted helplessly through the void. And standing in the dim red light of the failing ship was the man responsible, Captain Jake Carter. His hands were still cuffed. His face was still calm. Zorvak hated that calm. The warlord's sharp claws clenched into fists as he glared at the human. You think this is over? His voice was a low growl, a storm held back only by rage. Jake tilted his head. Over? He gave a slow, amused chuckle. Zorvak, this hasn't even started yet. Outside the interrogation room, the ship was unraveling. The sound of distant gunfire echoed through the steel corridors. Heavy boots pounded against the floors. Screams of Torlak warriors, a sound that had never existed before, rippled through the halls. For the first time in their history, the Torlak were not the hunters. They were prey. Zorvak turned sharply toward his communicator. Report. Static. Then a voice. Shaken, panicked. General, we're under attack. Unknown. The transmission cut off. Zorvak growled. This was impossible. The human fleet was still light years away. No distress signals had been sent. And yet, his ship was falling apart from the inside. How? The warlord's burning red eyes snapped back to Jake. What did you do? Jake just smiled. Nothing. Yet. Zorvak lunged forward in a blur of motion, grabbing Jake by his collar and lifting him into the air. You will tell me. Zorvak snarled. Jake didn't struggle. He didn't even flinch. Instead, he did something that made Zorvak's fury flicker into unease. He started counting. 3. Zorvak's claws tightened. 2. The warlord's breath came heavy. Something felt wrong. 1. The room exploded. The steel walls buckled outward as a forceful blast tore through the corridor just beyond the doors. Smoke, sparks, and shrapnel burst into the interrogation chamber, throwing Zorvak backward. Jake hit the floor, rolling smoothly onto his feet. His cuffs, now nothing more than twisted metal, fell away. Through the gaping hole in the wall, figures emerged from the smoke. Humans, but not just any humans. They were special forces operatives, their armored suits reflecting the dim emergency lights. Their movements were silent, precise, like predators in the dark. Weapons hummed with quiet energy. They did not shout. They did not waste time. They moved like ghosts. Zorvak's heart pounded. He staggered to his feet, snarling. Impossible, he roared. How did they get aboard? Jake cracked his neck and stretched his arms, finally free. The same way I did. Zorvak's mind raced. The ship's security was airtight. Its defenses were unbreakable. And yet, these humans had walked in like they owned the place. One of the operatives, a tall woman with piercing green eyes, stepped forward. Captain, Jake nodded. Good timing. Zorvac bared his teeth. Your fleet is still far. This changes nothing. Jake raised an eyebrow. Does it? Before Zorvac could react, his communicator crackled again. This time, it wasn't static. It was screaming. They're inside the command deck. Shields failing. Engines offline. Another voice cut in. THEYV take in the bridge. Zorvac's eyes widened. No, 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 no. That was impossible. Jake took a step closer, lowering his voice. You asked me what I did. Zorvac's claws twitched. His body, trained for war, wanted to attack. But his mind, his warrior's instinct, was warning him. Jake leaned in slightly. I let you capture me. The words hit like a shockwave. Zorvac's breath caught in his throat. Jake's eyes gleamed. You wanted to break me. But all you did was bring me exactly where I wanted to be. The warlord's chest tightened. He had been so sure, so certain. And now, for the first time in his life, he felt it. Fear. The fear of realizing he had been played. Jake turned to his team, nodding toward the ruined hallway. Let's wrap this up. The operatives moved like shadows, vanishing into the smoke. Zorvac took a shaky step back, his claws still curled into fists. How? How had he been outplayed by a single human? Jake adjusted his uniform and gave Zorvac one last smirk. You were right about one thing, General. Zorvac's throat felt dry. And what is that? Jake's grin widened. This is far from over. And with that, the human walked away. The human's answer to conquest. Zorvac had never felt fear before. Not on the battlefield. Not when facing dying warriors begging for mercy. Not when entire planets burned under his command. But now, as the mighty warship tyrant's wrath fell apart around him, he felt it creeping into his bones like a slow poison. Humans were not supposed to be this dangerous. Yet, here they were, inside his ship, dismantling it from the inside like a virus. Zorvac stood frozen in the ruins of the interrogation room. Smoke curled through the air. The distant screams of Torlak warriors, his warriors, echoed through the ship's failing halls. Jake Carter was gone. The human captain and his team had melted into the shadows, moving like ghosts through the ship's corridors. Zorvac had to act. Now. He slammed his fist against his communicator. To all Torlak warriors, regroup at the command deck. Kill every human you see. Silence. Then static. Then a voice, shaking with terror. General, they're everywhere. Zorvac's breathing slowed. Impossible. The human fleet was still light years away. There were no warships on the radar, no distress calls, no reinforcements detected. And yet, his own men were speaking like the battle was already lost. Another voice broke through the static. General, we can't reach engineering. Security teams are down. Then a new sound, a deep boom that sent a tremor through the deck beneath Zorvac's feet. The Torlak warlord gritted his teeth. This wasn't possible. His warriors were the most feared in the galaxy. Their warships were fortresses. Their technology was leagues beyond humanity. Yet somehow, the humans were winning. How? He needed answers. He needed control. He needed to kill Jake Carter. The shadows of war. Zorvac stormed through the corridors, flanked by his personal guards. Red emergency lights flashed along the walls. The ship was dying, its once mighty systems flickering in and out of life. Torlak bodies lay sprawled across the metal floors, their weapons still clutched in stiff hands. No gunfire. No explosions. The humans were silent, precise, deadly. Zorvac passed a security station, where a surveillance screen still flickered with life. He stopped, his breath caught in his throat. The camera showed dozens of humans, moving like shadows. They weren't storming the ship like an invading army. They were picking it apart piece by piece. Sabotaging engines, sealing blast doors, cutting off power to weapons. Not a single bullet wasted. They didn't fight wars the way the Torlak did. They didn't charge blindly into battle. They hunted, and the Torlak were the prey. Zorvak's claws dug into the steel console. He should have seen this coming, but he hadn't. Because humans were different. They were adaptable. They were unpredictable. They didn't play by the same rules. Zorvak's second in command, Commander Korleth, stormed into the room, his red armor stained with battle. "General, the humans." Zorvak didn't even look at him. "How many?" Korleth hesitated. His lips twitched. His muscles tensed. He didn't want to answer. Zorvak turned to him sharply. "I asked you, how many?" Korleth swallowed. Then, in a hushed voice, he spoke. 15. Silence. Zorvak's claws flexed. His breathing slowed. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. 15. 15 humans, against thousands of Torlak warriors. No, that was impossible. And yet, the evidence was right in front of him. His warship, the greatest war machine in the fleet, was falling because of 15 humans. The fatal mistake. Zorvak turned back to the surveillance screen. Jake Carter was there, moving through the halls, flanked by his team, like a predator with a plan. He wasn't running. He wasn't rushing. He was in control. And for the first time in his life, Zorvak realized his mistake. It wasn't just that he had underestimated the humans. It was why he had underestimated them. The Torlak were stronger. They were faster. They had better weapons. But humans had something far more dangerous. They had no rules. They didn't fight fair. They didn't surrender. They didn't fear death the way other species did. And worst of all, they learned. Every war, every battle, every loss. Humans learned, adapted, and came back stronger. That was why the Torlak had always won before. Because their enemies fought wars the old way. Humans, they didn't fight wars. They ended them. Zorvak's breath came slow and deep. He had never feared before. But now, standing in the ruins of his own warship, watching the humans dismantle his empire from within, he finally understood. The humans didn't fear him, because they knew they had already won. The final command. Zorvak turned to Korleth. His voice was calm. "Evacuate the ship." Korleth's eyes widened. "General, we've lost." Korleth opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. Because he saw the truth in his leader's eyes. The humans had already won. The only thing left was survival. Elsewhere, Jake Carter stood in the command center of Tyrant's Wrath. The Torlak officers lay unconscious at his feet. His team had taken the bridge without a single shot fired. Jake exhaled, tapping his communicator. "All teams, status. Engineering secure. Weapons offline. All exits locked down." Jake smirked. "Good." He turned to the screen, where Zorvak's personal shuttle was already preparing for launch. Jake didn't stop it. He let the warlord run, because he wanted Zorvak to tell the story. The story of the day humanity answered conquest with something far worse. Revenge. The breaking point. Zorvak had never run from battle. Not once. Not when entire planets burned under his command. Not when armies knelt before him, begging for mercy. He was a conqueror, a warlord, a legend among his people. And yet here he was, retreating from his own ship. The Tyrant's Wrath was lost. The alarms screamed through the corridors as Zorvak stalked toward the last operational escape shuttle. His personal guard followed in tight formation, their weapons raised, their movements quick and precise. But they weren't moving with confidence. They were moving with fear. The mighty warship, the pride of the Torlak fleet, was a graveyard now. Bodies of elite warriors littered the halls. Weapons lay discarded, their owners never getting the chance to fire them. And worst of all, the enemy had done this in complete silence. Zorvak's claws twitched as he stepped into the hangar bay. The massive blast doors were already open, revealing the shimmering darkness of space beyond. His shuttle was waiting, its engines thrumming, ready to take him away from this nightmare. But something made him hesitate. He turned back. And there, standing in the ruined corridors of his own ship, was Jake Carter, alone, unarmed, standing between Zorvak and his only escape. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the shuttle's engines filled the silence. Then Jake tilted his head, smirking. Going somewhere. Zorvak's claws flexed. His blood boiled. This one human. This one insignificant creature had done what no enemy had ever managed. He had brought the warlord of the Torlek Empire to his knees. Zorvak let out a low, dangerous growl. You think this is victory? He snarled, stepping forward. You think destroying one ship changes anything? Jake exhaled through his nose, as if amused. Oh, Zorvak, you still don't get it, do you? The warlord's eyes burned. Enlighten me. Jake took a slow step forward, unarmed, yet more dangerous than any soldier Zorvak had ever faced. This wasn't about winning a battle. Another step. This was about proving a point. Zorvak's jaw clenched. And what point is that? Jake smiled. That humans don't fear you. The words hit like a plasma blast to the chest. Zorvak's claws twitched. His warriors had conquered countless civilizations. Entire species trembled at the very mention of his name. His fleets crushed worlds beneath them. Yet this human, this single human, stood before him, fearless. Zorvak's breath came slow, deep. Humans should fear me, he rumbled. You are weak, fragile. Your kind breaks easily. Jake laughed softly. You don't get it, do you? He said, shaking his head. We don't break. We bend. We adapt. We survive. And then we come back and hit harder than before. His blue eyes locked onto Zorvak's burning red ones. That's why you'll never win. A long silence stretched between them. For the first time in his life, Zorvak had nothing to say. Because deep down, in the part of his mind that still clung to reason, he knew it was true. The Torlak had always won because their enemies fought by the same rules. Humans didn't have rules. They had instinct. They had rage. And worst of all, they had nothing to lose. Zorvak took a slow breath. Then, without another word, he turned and stepped into the shuttle. The door sealed behind him. Through the thick glass, he saw Jake Carter standing in the hangar, watching him. No anger, no hatred, just calm, quiet certainty. The engines roared to life. And for the first time in his existence, Zorvak retreated. As the shuttle sped away, he looked back at the once great tyrant's wrath. It was over. Jake had won. But as Zorvak sat in the darkness of his shuttle, one thought burned in his mind. Humans don't fear us. He exhaled slowly. Then we will have to learn to fear them. The legendary response. The Torlek fleet was in chaos. Zorvak's personal shuttle streaked away from the wreckage of the tyrant's wrath, its engines burning white-hot against the void. The once mighty warship, the pride of the Torlek Empire, now drifted like a corpse, its defenses gutted, its warriors defeated, all because of one man. Zorvak sat in the dimly lit command seat of the shuttle, his claws gripping the armrests so tightly that the metal creaked beneath his strength. The warlord of the most feared race in the galaxy had just lost everything. His mind was a battlefield. It wasn't the loss of a single warship that ate at him. It wasn't even the deaths of thousands of his warriors. It was the why. Why had this happened? How had 15 humans, just 15, torn through his ship like a knife through soft flesh? Zorvak had spent his entire life crushing civilizations, bending them to his will. And now, for the first time, he had been outmatched by a species that shouldn't have stood a chance. His communicator crackled. "General," came the voice of one of his remaining commanders. What are your orders? Orders? Zorvac had no orders. His mind was still locked in that last moment, the final conversation before his retreat. Jake Carter's voice echoed in his skull. That's why you'll never win. Zorvac bared his teeth. He needed answers, and there was only one man who could give them to him. The signal. Jake Carter stood on the ruined bridge of the tyrant's wrath. The ship was his now, a conquered relic of a failed invasion. Behind him, his team worked to secure the last of the systems. The Torlak crew was either dead or locked in containment. It was over. But then, a transmission request flashed across the command console. Jake's brow furrowed. He leaned forward and tapped the interface. Incoming transmission, ZO or VAK. The bridge fell silent. Jake exhaled through his nose, a slow smile creeping onto his lips. Patch him through. A second later, the holographic display flickered to life, revealing Zorvac's furious, battle-scarred face. Even through the transmission, Jake could see the storm in his eyes. Good. Let him wrestle with it. Zorvac's voice came low and steady, but there was something else beneath it. A tightness. A hesitation. Tell me, human. Jake tilted his head. Tell you what? Zorvac's claws tapped against the armrest of his chair, slow and deliberate. His breathing was measured, like a predator trying to calm itself after being outmaneuvered. Why? Jake folded his arms. You'll have to be more specific, big guy. Zorvac's red eyes burned. Why do you not fear me? The bridge remained dead silent. Zorvac's words hung heavy in the air, a demand laced with something more. Something dangerous, something that had never existed before in the warlord's mind. Doubt. Jake took his time. He let the silence stretch, let the warlord sit with his own question. Then he spoke. Because I know the truth. Zorvac's jaw tightened. Jake leaned forward, resting his hands against the console. You're not invincible. You never were. You just convinced yourself you were. The warlord's expression didn't change. But his fingers twitched. Jake saw it. He had him. Jake's voice was calm, almost amused. The real problem isn't that I don't fear you. He paused. It's that now you fear me. Zorvac's chest rose and fell in slow, deliberate breaths. Jake smiled. And that's a problem for you, isn't it? Zorvac didn't answer. He didn't have to. Because in that moment, he knew Jake was right. The Torlak had always ruled through fear. Fear of their power. Fear of their brutality. Fear of their strength. But what happens when the prey stops running? What happens when the prey turns around and fights? The answer was simple. The hunter becomes the hunted. Zorvac exhaled slowly. Then he cut the transmission. The new reality. Jake leaned back from the console, stretching his arms with a satisfied sigh. One of his operatives, Lieutenant Harris, let out a low whistle. Well, that was intense. Jake chuckled. Yeah, he's having a rough day. Harris folded her arms. You think he'll be back? Jake turned toward the shattered viewports of the bridge, staring out into the infinite dark of space. The Torlak weren't done. They would return, eventually. But next time, they wouldn't be the ones making the rules. Jake smirked. Yeah, he'll be back. He turned away from the window, walking toward the exit. But next time, he'll be a little more careful. Because the galaxy had changed. And for the first time in history, humans weren't afraid. The rest of the universe was. The fall of a conqueror. Zorvac had never felt the weight of silence before. The bridge of his personal warship, the Black Talon, was eerily quiet. The hum of power running through the ship's core, the faint sounds of crew working at their stations, none of it brought him comfort. Not after what had happened. He stood at the edge of the command deck, staring out through the massive viewport. The distant remains of his once mighty flagship, Tyrant's Wrath, floated in the darkness, a shattered monument to his failure. His ship, his crew, his legacy. All taken from him. by humans, by one human. His claws curled into fists. His red eyes burned as he replayed the last conversation in his mind. The real problem isn't that I don't fear you. It's that now you fear me. Zorvac hated how true it was. The consequence of defeat. The doors behind him hissed open. His second-in-command, Commander Korlev, entered. His armor was polished, his stance stiff, but Zorvac could smell the unease on him. The crew was watching him differently now. They had always feared him, respected him. But now they looked at him as if he were weakened, as if his invincibility had been shattered. Because it had. Korlev cleared his throat. The High Council is demanding your presence, General. Zorvac's jaw tightened. The Council. The rulers of the Torlek Empire. They had never questioned him before. But now they saw what everyone else saw. The greatest warlord of the Torlek Empire had lost. To a single human. Zorvac turned away from the viewport and walked toward the exit. Prepare the transmission. Korlev hesitated. General, they are not pleased. Zorvac didn't break his stride. Neither am I. The judgment of the Council. The massive holographic chamber flickered to life. Zorvac stood in the center, surrounded by the projected figures of the Torlak High Council, 12 of the most powerful rulers in the empire. Their faces were unreadable, their golden armor reflecting the dim light. At the head of them all sat Overlord Varkash, the supreme leader of the Torlak. His black armor was lined with crimson, his massive frame nearly as imposing as Zorvac's own. But there was no mistaking the look in his cold yellow eyes. Disappointment. Varkash's voice rumbled through the chamber. Explain yourself, General. Zorvac held his ground. The humans. Yes, the humans. Varkash interrupted, his tone sharp. The primitive race you assured us would be nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Zorvac's claws flexed. They were supposed to be. A different council member, Lady Vosnar, leaned forward. Her voice was calm, but deadly. And yet, 15 of them tore through your warship and left you running like a wounded animal. The chamber went deathly silent. Zorvac's blood boiled. His fists clenched at his sides. Varkash's voice was softer now, but far more dangerous. You have brought shame upon the Empire, Zorvac. Zorvac growled low in his throat. Then allow me to correct it. The council murmured amongst themselves. Varkash's expression remained unreadable. You believe you can still defeat them? He asked. Zorvac's eyes blazed. I will not make the same mistake twice. The new war. Somewhere, in the depths of space, aboard the captured tyrant's wrath, Jake Carter sat in the command chair. The once great warship of the Torlak now belonged to humanity. The screens flickered with intelligence reports. New data flooded in from deep space scouts. The human fleet was rallying, preparing for the next move. Lieutenant Harris stepped forward, her arms crossed. You think he'll come back? Jake smirked, leaning back in the chair. Oh, I'm counting on it. Harris frowned. You sound almost excited. Jake exhaled, looking out at the vast, endless void. He learned something today. Yeah. Harris raised an eyebrow. And what's that? Jake's smirk widened. That he should have killed us when he had the chance. The bridge fell silent. Because they all knew the truth. Zorvac had left a survivor. And the thing about humans. When you let them live, they come back. And this time, it wouldn't be 15 of them. It would be all of them. The legend begins. Across the galaxy, the story spread like wildfire. The mighty Torlak Empire, defeated. Not by another empire. Not by a fleet. By a handful of humans. Fear rippled through alien worlds. The races who had once feared the Torlak began to rethink their allegiances. And the Torlak, for the first time in their history, they had to prepare for war. But this war was different. Because now, they weren't the hunters. They were the hunted. And the humans. They were coming.